Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? How are we doing? There we go. There we go. I just realized I left my notes back there, so this is going to be an interesting trip.
We'll wing it.
Exactly. So it is an absolute honor to be with all of you back in person at the Future of Florida Forum. I was thinking about this on my way up here this morning. I'm not going to get to stay tonight because I'm trying to stay married, and my wife doesn't give me a lot of slack because I'm gone so much with the legislature. But I remember the first time I spoke to the chamber, they said, Vance, we're going to give you 2 minutes to talk about the importance of early learning. So I did my best to do 2 minutes. The next year they said, okay, you did all right last year. We're going to give you 5 minutes this year. Then it was 7 minutes. It's 10 minutes. We have 12 minutes today, Tripp, to convince all these people about why early learning is so important. But before we get started, I have to do this. I want to publicly thank Mark Wilson, who I think is the greatest CEO of any state chamber of commerce in the entire country. So can we get a round of applause for... You have no idea how good Mark is. I just saw him in the back in the kitchen. He was actually making that cake that you guys were eating. So he's fighting for free enterprise and baking cakes at the same time. So it's an honor, again, as I said, to be here. As you just heard, I'm the CEO of an organization called the Children's Movement of Florida, which is one of the state's largest advocacy organizations focused on early childhood intervention. And I have the honor of serving in the Florida House of Representatives and serve as the chair of the Early Learning and Elementary Education Subcommittee. But I want to talk to you today about an issue that I think is critical, not only to the work that Tripp does, but I think it's essential to every single industry that is represented in this room. If you've heard me speak over the last 6 or 7 years about the importance of early learning, you've always heard me talk about the workforce of tomorrow, right? It's the 2030 goals. How are we preparing those third grade students today to be ready for the workforce in 2030? And that's always been my narrative, this idea that we need to invest early to ensure that we're giving students that foundation. But if the pandemic showed us anything, it showed us that early learning is also about the workforce of today. And as we saw in my community, 85% of child care centers closed their doors across Miami-Dade County at the height of the pandemic, leaving moms and dads struggling to find places to put their children so that they could be on the front lines fighting COVID. And the challenges have only increased, and that's what Tripp is going to talk about with us today. So Tripp, I was reading your bio. You texted me. I didn't want to tell you this privately. I'm going to say it publicly. You went to the University of Virginia.
I did.
And I don't know if you all know this. University of Virginia actually beat my Miami Hurricanes in the last game in the Orange Bowl. No, stop clapping. And you guys didn't even let us score a point. It was 48-0 in the last game at the Orange Bowl, so the Virginia Cavaliers really, you embarrassed us, Tripp, so this is my chance to embarrass you. Okay?
Not known for our football, so every now broken clock is right twice a day, so
yeah, exactly. So Tripp, you and your family have been involved in early childhood for decades now.
Yeah, 1979, my parents founded the first Children's Nest, and so we've been in it, 42 years now. I joined the company about 20 years ago, and I've been the CEO about 10 years. And we now have 7 schools in Hillsborough and Pasco counties. It's been good to our family, and we've been good to early learning, but it's been a challenging couple of years, to say the very least. So that's my background in it.
And we were talking about your center. So you have children who are private pay, meaning that their parents are paying for the full amount. You have VPK, which is our state's universal pre-K program, and you have school readiness children, which are children who are income eligible for a subsidy from the state, correct?
That's exactly right. It's a bit of a mixed, a blended base of children, but that's what most private child care providers do. When you open a school, you will have a VPK contract because that age group is eligible for that, and the state pays for that, which is awesome. And so that age group are covered by that, but then you also have private pay, which is the bulk of our students, and then I've got certain schools based in different socioeconomic areas of town that have a higher percentage of school readiness kids and kids that get public assistance. So yeah, we have a blended, school.
So, Tripp, you've been in this industry for, my goodness, 30 years now, correct? Over 30 years, over 3 decades. Tell us what the pandemic was like.
Brutal from a business point of view. Now, I'm not the only one, right? Lots of people here had difficult financial and business struggles, but it was really difficult for us. Children's Nest, at least, fortunately stayed open. Again, your numbers were very difficult down in the southern part of the state. I'd also, and I can mention this as some background, I'm the president of a trade association, the largest in the state for childcare, so we sort of have our hands all over the state, and I get feedback from our staff and from schools around the state that are members of our organization. I think about 40% of schools across the state closed. and you're talking about a huge disruption of cash flow in business, and that crunch is still being felt today. And we're sort of starting to come back. I think demand is back up and people want our services. Now the challenge is turned into more of a staffing challenge, and so we're having a very, very difficult time. We've got waiting lists at all our schools. I hear that there are waiting lists across the state, and we simply can't take in families that need our care just to go back to work.
So I'm going to translate what Tripp is saying. So this is really important. So you cannot find teachers to hire, correct?
Absolutely not. We are probably, in the raw numbers vary 12-20% down in total staffing amongst all schools in the state of Florida, somewhere in that range. And that would match up with about what I'm seeing at my schools, 15-20% down. And what we're seeing is two things. Schools like ours a little bit operate, and this is an analogy I use that people sort of get, like an airline route, like a route from, I don't know, Tampa to Atlanta. And the airline's not making any money on that route till the last 20 seats are filled. Up until then, it's paying for the fuel and the airplane and staffing costs, et cetera, et cetera. And you really aren't doing anything until you get those last 20 seats filled. It's the same way in a classroom. So if we've got 10 or 11 children ordinarily in a 2-year-old classroom, and now we've got 7 or 8 because of staffing issues and other issues, that's all the margins that our business has. So we are our margins are thin anyway, even before the pandemic. If you take away 20% of our revenues, there's a cash crunch, so that's a challenge. But the real challenge, Vance, you're 1,000% right, is we can't find people to work.
So folks, if you were to go to any of the child care centers in your community, and I was looking at the data last week, the average salary for an early learning teacher, and I say that very intently because they are teachers. They're not babysitters, they're not daycare workers, these are teachers. I want to see anyone in this room spend 12 hours a day with 18 4-year-olds. Think about it. These are angels on earth. But the rate that people are laughing. They're not. But the reality is this: the rate that we're paying these teachers is somewhere between $11 and $12 an hour across the state. So people are literally looking down the street and seeing that Chick-fil-A is paying $17 an hour, paying for your college, paying for all these benefits, and they're having to make an economic decision saying, I really want to go into the classroom, I really want to be an educator, but financially I can't do it. And then the challenge that Tripp has is that Tripp is guided by ratios that the state mandates. So he can only have a certain number of children with each teacher. But if he doesn't have the teachers, he can't serve the students. So he has a waiting list of students, parents and families who need care, and he cannot serve them. It's a supply side issue.
Absolutely. I think lots and lots of industries would be jealous that I've got customers lining up out my door that would love to buy our services, for lack of a better term. So that's not the issue. The demand is absolutely there. I can't supply the classrooms and the teachers to make it happen, and I'm not the only one across the state. That's an industry-wide challenge. So you're right, teachers in my industry aren't paid enough, and it's something we've got to address. It was something we knew we had to address pre-pandemic, but I think with the school closures and the shrinkage in demand when the pandemic was at its worst, I think people left our industry and they're simply not coming back. Now, I've talked about this before, and I just like you said, the angels in the classroom. Listen, I've got 80% of my workforce back, and they're killing it. They're working extra hours, they're skipping breaks, they're taking on extra shifts. They're doing a fantastic job. So the idea that no one wants to work simply isn't true. But that last 20%, our industry has to find a way to attract those teachers and new people to the industry back to us so that we can fill the demand that's out there in the industry and get people back to work.
Absolutely. And again, the recurring theme of this conference, my guess, is going to be the labor shortage. I was at Florida State Prison last Friday talking to the warden there, talking about having 170 unfilled positions at Florida State Prison because they cannot find the staff to fill those roles. And I asked him, I said, what do you think the most important investment that we should be making as a society to ensure that people don't end up here? And he said, early childhood education. But I think the distinction for the early childhood industry, which is different from so many other industries, is that if we don't figure out the labor shortage issue in your industry, the rest of the industries can't operate the way that they should.
Amen.
You can clap for that. I want to celebrate the Florida Chamber of Commerce because they have elevated this issue to a place where it was not elevated for the last 20 years. And for people to understand that, again, as I said, this is not babysitting. This is essential to the workforce of 2030, and it's essential to the workforce of today. So our ticker's moving down, but I wanted to let you speak to this entire group and say, what should the business community be doing to support the early childhood industry?
A couple of things, Vance, and I would say this. One interesting tack that we have taken at my schools and that other schools are taking is sort of a shrinkflation tactic, which is common in other industries, whereas the cereal box might still cost $3 like it did a couple years ago, but now there's 7 ounces of cereal in it instead of 8, and that's how the manufacturers are kind of absorbing some of the costs. Believe it or not, we've done the same thing. We used to be open from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. We're now 7 a.m. to 5:45. That's a 7% reduction in the time we're open. That's been a lifesaver for our labor costs, which are our single biggest expense. And I've had many, many talks with my parents at our schools, and I've given them letters to them to go back to their work and say, listen, the school that my kid's been at for 3 years, he loves his teachers and we love the school. We want to stay there, but I can't be at work at 7 o'clock because they don't open till 7. And I might have chosen because they opened at 6:30, but it's been 3 years. So I would ask business leaders, be flexible with your staff and your employees. If they're having a crunch on the front end or the back end, or if they have to close for a week or two for a COVID illness, maybe there's some way we can be understanding and realize that they can't just pick another school. There's waiting lists at every school. It's not just ours. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be, be open-minded to solutions that maybe we wouldn't have thought of a few years ago for our industry. I think the industry needs some support, and that support could come from a lot of different places. It could come from legislatively, it could come from business areas, it could come from companies expanding the benefits that they offer as far as supporting childcare or supporting flexible work hours so that parents can manage it legislatively. High quality care, which is what we need and what Vance really beats the drum on, and we're so thankful for it. That costs money. I hate to be that crass, but high quality care costs money. And there could be some legislative solutions there, maybe down the road, maybe they're private solutions, we'll just have to see. But I think everyone's got to be a little open-minded to the fact that childcare is struggling right now, and if we can't fully get back on our feet with better staffing solutions, it's really going to kind of hold back Florida's growth, I would think. I'm no expert in this, but I just know that parents tell us they can't go to work, or we hear a parent has to leave, or if they can't get in our school, that one of the 2 parents is going to have to stop working. And these are prospective parents, and there's nothing I can do about it. So that would be sort of a broad scope, Vance, of ideas.
You took the words out of my mouth, because my call to action to this group was, 1, understand the policies that are coming through the state. And again, I feel so honored to be in the role that I am in the legislature, because the last 10 years of my life have been focused exclusively on this issue. So bringing policies to the forefront that heretofore have not been discussed, I think, is critical. And we passed, this truly transformational legislation last year with the support of the Florida Chamber, led by Chair Grawl and myself, literally professionalizing the entire industry. Each of you as organizations, beyond the politics, can be leaders in your own community in terms of how do you implement policies for your employees that are family friendly. And you mentioned some of those, whether it's paid leave or it's flexible work hours, understanding that families are struggling right now and going through challenges that did not exist prior to the pandemic. But our clock just hit 0, but I'm going to say this to everyone in this room. Some of you have heard me say this before, and any of you who are new, I want you to think about this. If you think that this issue does not matter to your industry, the children that Tripp is educating today, the last time we took the Florida Kindergarten Readiness Screener, 43% of the children coming into kindergarten in Florida were deemed not ready, okay? My wife was a kindergarten teacher. I know how hard she worked. And you would think that trying as hard as they do that we would catch those children up. But by 3rd grade, we have 44% of students who cannot read proficiently. So you would say, okay, we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying. And you look at 10th grade reading scores, and 44% of 10th graders in the state still cannot read at proficiency. So there's a direct line from the classroom that Chip operates to whether or not those children are going to graduate from high school and be able to serve the needs that you have as industry. So if you don't think about this issue today as something that's going to impact your bottom line in 15 years, heaven help you. Because at the end of the day, the investments we make today, the policies we implement today are going to define the future of our state. And again, I'm truly grateful, Tripp, for your leadership and for the leadership of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Vance, this way.